Welcome back to Half the Battle. I'm your host, as always, Daniel Levi, and joining me now is the agent and CEO of Top Game Management and the head coach at the New England Cartel. I'm talking about Tyson Chartier. Tyson, welcome to Half the Battle.
Hey, man, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine. So obviously, for those that don't know, you're the head coach and manager or agent of Calvin Kattar, Rob Font, Mike Rodriguez, among others. So it's an honor to have you on. So the first thing is, what's your film study process like? Because obviously, you know, Half the Battle, this is a betting show. You know, we love to watch film on every single fight. And I noticed that you go in a lot of detail, man. So, like, what's your film study process like? What hours of the day are you watching film? And do you watch fighters' entire careers, or is it kind of like their last 5 fights, or what?
Yeah, so, I'm a nerd of the game. Like, I watch all the fights. Like, Saturday night there'll be fights. I watch from the prelims all the way through the main event. I do that with every card just to kind of look for trends and stuff like that. But when it comes to one of my guys getting a fight, the first, especially Rob and Calvin, like, I'm their coach. I manage a lot of guys, and I'll watch film if their coaches ask me to, but I don't try to step on toes. But with Rob and Calvin, I break down the video. So, depending on who they're fighting, I'll go through and I watch every single fight. Like, anything that's out there, even if it's like grappling videos, I'm watching that just to look for tendencies and see things that maybe they've done at the beginning of their career that they're carrying over to now. So you can see that, okay, there's definite patterns there. You look for, okay, how does this guy get hurt generally? How does he win generally? And then you start to see trends, and you start to, like you said, like, see tendencies that they have that maybe we can exploit. And then from there, it's like, it's a pretty in-depth process. I go through, watch all the fights with no volume. And then I go through and I watch them again, and then I'll watch with volume after, just because sometimes the announcers, they do homework too. They'll give you some background. They'll tell you, oh, this kid was a college wrestler or something, and maybe you can't find that on Google or something like that. Or they'll say, he's been training with this guy working on this and whatever. So, you can pick up little tidbits in there, but I try to watch it first with no volume just so I don't get a little, there's no bias, and I'm not looking for certain things that the announcers are pointing out. And, and I look for tendencies that I'm seeing, and then I'll go back, watch with the volume, and then I go back and I just keep watching and looking for new things. And it's amazing after you watch someone's career 4 or 5 times, and then the 6th time through you might see something that you didn't see the first 5 times. Then you're like, oh, there it is. It's cool. I call it those light bulb moments. Where you go through and you're like, how the hell do you beat this kid? And then all of a sudden you see it and you're like, there it is. And then you see it come out on fight night when everything comes to plan. It's it makes all the hard work worth it. But
so speaking of turning off the audio, because I know exactly what you're talking about, that way you're not swayed by anything. I kind of wish, and tell me your opinion on this, that they had an option where you could just turn off the commentary, because I still want to hear the shots being landed. You know what I mean? I want to know if they have that real impact. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, now that you're seeing no fans in the crowd, you're hearing it a lot more. I think I tweeted out this last week when I cornered William Knight, those elbows that he landed in the Contender Series against Brundage's head. It's like it didn't come over on the camera, but like when you were there, you could just hear it. It's almost like a baseball bat hitting like a log or something. It was just like a thud, and you're like, damn, that has to hurt. And then obviously it did, dropped them. But yeah, I mean, you can definitely. I think people are starting to realize how violent the sport is now. That obviously it's a sport, but there's some violence to it. And then when you're hearing these shots with no crowd, it's like, oh geez, like that. Not used to hearing that, it's definitely makes it more real.
Yeah, no questions asked about that. So, I mean, do you set out certain hours of the day? Because like you just told us, you're one of these guys that you watch an entire career and you'll watch it over and over. So, I mean, are there certain hours where it's like, hey, this is my film study time of the day?
It's I got 3 kids. I got a wife. So the kids are in bed by 7:30, and then, during the day, we're either training or I'm doing my daily stuff. My phone's always going off with, we got like 30 guys that I represent. So there's always something going on, and, trying to book fights, stuff like that. And then fortunately later in the day, I tend to have a little bit more downtime where the kids are in bed and the phone's a little bit more quiet. And it's usually after that. And then, I get into it though. Like, it might start out at like 9 o'clock, and then next thing I know, it's 2 a.m. and I'm still like, you're all wired up. You can't turn it off. And then you're looking for things, and it's almost like a sick addiction, really. But
2 parts of a fighter's team that are often kept separate are coaching and managing. How do you kind of balance between being an agent and a coach?
It's, obviously it's a unique spot. I know some people mock the position. I know some of the guys that are managers, they call them trainagers and stuff like that. And there is a lot of
Fanagers.
hacks. Yeah, there's a lot of, I think it gets a bad rap because there is a lot of coaches that try to hold on past their skill set. And I think there's a lot of managers that try to go past their skill set and coach. Um, I think the proof is in the pudding that, if you look at me, Rob, and Calvin, like obviously, Rob's 9 or 10 right now, keeps switching, and Calvin's 6. And, we've headlined a few cards this year. And, and I've been with Calvin and Rob there, Calvin's for 5 years and Rob his whole career since the first day he ever did an MMA practice. So, being their coach, it's a lot of dedication and it takes a certain skill set, but then being their manager takes a whole different skill set, and you try to blend the two. And I think with those two guys, we found synergy in it, and it works. I'm not going to say it's super scalable because the amount of time that I have to put into breaking down videos and really handling them the way I wish someone would have handled me when I was fighting, it's not super scalable, So it's almost that boxing camp style where it's like, okay, we have a little small group, we have a small circle. These are the people we trust. We're going to go all in and make it happen. I don't think you could do that if I was coaching 50 fighters,
Yeah, no doubt about it. So you and I had an interesting exchange on Twitter recently, and I don't like getting into back and forth on Twitter just because it's like one of those things where I'd rather you hear my tone, like see my facial expressions and like know where I'm coming from. Because I know on Twitter, if you never heard me talk before, it just might sound a certain way. So let's get this out the way. You coached Anthony Rocco Martin, Tony Martin, when he fought Neil Magny. And actually, Tony did the camp here in Atlanta, Georgia, where I'm from. He did it with Zhucao, with the Lima brothers, with my good friend Cody Durden. So he was in very good hands. And when you watch a fight between Santiago Ponzinibbio and Neil Magny, firstly, Santiago actually made it look easy. He made it seem like, it's all you got to do is calf kick him, set up the right hand, stuff his takedowns, and it's going to be an easy night at the office, right? So after that devastating knockout, and honestly, before the knockout, it was a clinic by Santiago Ponzinibbio. So he fights Li Jingliang. And in the Li Jingliang fight, what I guess I noticed was that Li Jingliang got very, very tired almost like a minute and a half into the fight. Now, after that, he fought a bit uncharacteristic in terms of what I've seen in the past. He's known for being a power puncher his entire career. He was actually going out there and offensively trying to wrestle against Magny, which I found kind of odd, but I kind of was like, you know what, maybe he's kind of gassed and, maybe, the fight's outside of China, whatever the case may be. I gave him a pass, but I was like, you know what, because, I bet, but just so you know, there's no like bitterness when you lose. This is like a long-term game. So individual results, it's about the long term. But I was like, but you know what? Li Jingliang didn't throw a single kick. You know who's got a very good calf kick game? Tony Martin. So when I'm scouting the film on a fight like that, I'm thinking Tony Martin's going to chop him down with the calf kicks. And even though Tony Martin doesn't have the same volume as a guy like Neil Magny, I think he hits hard enough. I think that right hand is good enough to where he can kind of slow down the pace of Magny. And if Magny tries to shoot, obviously, Tony Martin, firsthand his, his guillotine series, his front headlock, his anaconda, his darts. I thought it was going to be smooth sailing. So, and I'm sorry I'm talking so much. I got to preface this all the way. So back in Tony Martin's lightweight days, basically the criticism was that in the first round he looked like a world beater, but then he'd kind of gas out as the fights progressed. But it seemed like when he got to 170 pounds, he patched that up. We saw him get finishes in the third round. We saw him win decisions. We saw him do the whole bit. In the Neil Magny fight, that was the first time in a long time where I kind of saw him really get tired in a fight. Was that simply due to, Neil Magny pushing that Denver elevation type pace? Is there something we don't know about? Before we talk about, Neil going southpaw and all that stuff, why do you think that Tony slowed down in the second half of that fight?
So when Tony went to Atlanta, Tony used to train here in Boston with us, and then he was at 55. He was cutting too much weight. And I kept bugging him to go up to 55, and he's like, no, I'll be fine. And his other coach, Brock Larson, who's been with his whole career, was like, no, I don't know, maybe he's got a good size advantage at 55. And then so when he went down to ATT, I was like, listen, just train with them down there, the 170s, when you're not dieting, and see how you do. And he was like, dude, I'm doing really good. And then I talked to Mike Brown, who was his head coach while he was down there, and he's like, dude, he's a 170 pounder. And so we kept him at 170, and he started doing really well. And he was able to do. He had more energy to do stuff because it wasn't about diet camp. It wasn't that. It was a fight camp where he was able to, fill some holes. And so he started getting a lot of road work in, which is something he had never really had the energy to do in his career because he was always dieting. And so since he's been in Florida, then in Atlanta, he was always doing a lot of road work. And then going into this fight, he tweaked his knee during camp, which actually isn't even the same injury he got the surgery. But he tweaked his knee. We had it checked out by the PI, and they're like, listen, just no more road work. So he came into this fight not being able to do like a big part of his cardio plan. And I know that's kind of like more the boxing style, you get your road work in, you can still get in shape after that. But the problem was it was during the pandemic, and all the places that he had available to lift down in Atlanta weren't open.
Yeah.
So that was still at that time. So that's why we went out to Vegas early, a week early, and, got some work done at the PI. So we were out there for 2 weeks before that fight, just to get work on the knee. And so that was a little bit of concern going in. And obviously the way the fight panned out, he wasn't able to kind of keep his range as much as we would have liked. And, it's easy to go in with the plan, but then when you're in there with a guy that has an 80-inch reach and you're in a 25-foot cage instead of a 30-foot cage or whatever it is, it's all of a sudden you see things and like, this isn't what I thought it would be. And unfortunately, Tony didn't quite fight how he wanted to, but the plan was, we'll kind of get into it now. The plan was, he wanted to shoot on right away just to even up the striking, to make it like, okay, I don't want to kick anymore. I got to keep my stance lower, fight a little shorter. Because, when you're worried about a takedown, you're not going to fight as long. You're not going to be up on your feet and be as long. So he was going to take him down right away and then, not struggle too much if he tried to scramble to get up, to let him up, just to kind of like show him what's up, And then when he came out southpaw, that threw him off a little bit. And so then when they had their first exchange, Tony went in for the clinch, and then he just felt like, he's not that strong. I can kind of just hold him here, chip away. That's kind of what Neil Magny does to people, So he's like, all right, I'm safe. I'm winning right here. I don't have to deal with his range. Make him work to get off. Because at the end of the day, like, you're the one stuck in the bad spot. You should have to try to get away, So we're controlling the fight right there. Yeah, it's not super sexy, but we're pushing him against the fence, and, it's his job to get off. And I think in that first round, he had like 2 minutes and 47 seconds of cage control. And then the strikes were pretty much even. I think the total strikes was like 20-14, and the significant strikes were 12-11. So like, we're pretty confident we win that round. So he's like, all right, I just won the round. Didn't take any damage. Don't have to deal with him being a long rangy southpaw. I can just push him against the fence and, maybe steal a couple takedowns and just, fine. I'll do the same thing in the second round. And second round, he came out. He did get the takedown. I think he was on top for like 32 seconds. And then he had about a minute of cage control. And then aside from that, it was like, I think the total strikes was like 22-14, but the significant strikes were 14-11 again. So it was like very even. And the optics of it is like, okay, Neil landed a couple leg kicks, but Tony landed some good leg kicks too. And I think Tony landed probably the hardest shot, which was the big right hand that he had in the second round. So we're thinking like, all right, it's 2-0 going into the third. But at this point now, Tony's fighting a style that he wasn't planning on fighting while not being able to do road work, and he got tired. And that's what you saw in the third round was him just trying to survive, thinking he was up 2-0, and not take too much risk to get finished, but try to like go as much as you can. But anybody who's ever fought before, sometimes it's not your night for having energy for 15 minutes, and your cardio evades you, and at that point you're just holding on to a thread. You're just trying to like finish the round, And I think a lot of people have been there. It's unfortunate to be there, in the fight like that, where then it sucks. Big moment, main card, big pay-per-view, and last fight of his contract, and it was unfortunate the way it ended. It, but I think it was 15 of the 20 media people had Tony winning rounds 1 and 2, but then 2 of those judges had us losing all 3 rounds, which was, I was pretty surprised. I think everybody there was surprised. Neil Magny went up to him right after the fight. Like before the decision was read, he's like, congratulations. And then after the decision was read, he was like, dude, I didn't win that fight. So really? I was like, it is what it is. Like there's nothing wrong with that. It's not Neil's fault. Like Neil's a beast. You saw what he just did to Lawler. Like that's not on him. It's the judges, and that's our fault, But it just, obviously I'm sensitive when it comes to Tony, because now here he is, loses the last fight of his contract. He's 5-2 at 170, with his only losses being to Damian Maia and Neil Magny. And then now he's not sure if he's going to get a new contract. And you have Neil Magny come over here and be a co-main event in his next fight, get a new contract, and beat the shit out of Robbie Lawler. Now, who knows what Robbie Lawler that was? Maybe he'll come back his next fight and we'll know. But the fact of the matter is that they're former champion, and he just dismantled them.
Yeah.
And So yeah, so that's why when you sent out that tweet, like, why did Li Jing Liang and Tony and Robbie try to grapple him? It's like, I get what you're saying. Like, you're not wrong, but don't compare what I was just saying. And it wasn't like an argument on Twitter, because I don't go back and forth with anybody either. Is don't compare Tony's performance in a fight that most of the people think Tony won, including Neil. Maybe Neil goes back and watches it and thinks, okay, now I think I won. But at the time, most of the people think Tony won, even the other fighter. And then, Li Jingliang did horrible. Robbie Lawler looked like dog crap. So that's all I was saying is, like, let's not put it out in the universe that those fights are at all comparable, because, I think Tony's someone, obviously he's like, one of my best friends, and, I love the kid. And so I just wish, this is just frustrating that he doesn't already have a contract. And then you see them signing some of these new guys on the Contender Series or these last minute, guys that probably Tony would walk through, and then they're getting in and, getting contracts in the UFC. And then it's just unfortunate the whole way it's played out, with Tony then needing to get knee surgery and then getting a staph infection from the knee surgery. And, he's had an IV in his arm for 6 weeks with, antibiotics going straight to his heart. And he finally got that out, but now he's still another month out before he can really train. And, it stinks. The kid's, obviously he's a beast at 170. He's only lost to Maya, and I thought he beat Neil Magny. There's no shame in that. Obviously it was at least close. And now here he is, like, injured from an injury he got in a fight that he thought he won, but the judges didn't give it to him. And now he doesn't even know if he's going to have a contract or a job. And so it's just a tough place to be. It's just, obviously that's what the sport is. But so that was probably my the ammunition behind why I replied to the tweet. Because for the most part, I'm pretty inactive on Twitter. Now I'm trying to get a little busier. But for the most part, I don't get into pissing matches on Twitter. And even if I do say something, it's always, I wasn't disrespectful or anything like that. I was like, hey, it's never like name calling, swearing, or, insults or anything like that. So that was where I was coming from on that.
Yeah, and I 100% feel your frustration. And just for everybody watching, I mean, everything you said is 100% factual, in the sense that I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, and I can confirm that during that time period, the gyms were closed. So, and man, that just sucks, because it's like, you got to get that road work in when you're fighting a guy, that trains in that Denver elevation, who's known for pushing that pace all 3 rounds. So I completely feel your frustration. I guess where I'm coming from is like this. And again, who gives a shit that I lost a bet? That doesn't mean anything. That's not even what I'm not trying to place blame, nothing. For me, it was more so I'm watching the tape on both them, and I'm like, yeah, we're going to go out. And I say we, because I feel like I'm Team Martin when I got, bunch of money on him, right? So I feel like we're going to go out there, we're going to calf kick this guy, hit him with the right hand, and then, have an answer for his takedown attempts. So the fight starts off, and I haven't watched it since it happened live, so maybe I need to go back and rewatch it. But when it was happening live, I vividly remember Neil Magny going southpaw, and at that moment I was like, fuck. Because as you know firsthand, Tyson, if you're trying to get off on a leg kick game plan, I mean, it's so much harder to kick a southpaw than it is an orthodox fighter. It's much easier to check as a southpaw. And it was actually Neil Magny going out there kicking Martin. So did the southpaw surprise you? And did Magny coming out there leg kicking Martin surprise you?
Yeah, no, we knew Neil had decent leg kicks. The southpaw did throw Tony off a little bit, and that's something maybe, I noticed that he did, in some of his fights, he did come out southpaw, but I didn't think because I really thought he was going to try to wrestle us, so I didn't think he'd come out southpaw. People usually like to shoot out of their regular stance. So if he comes out southpaw, it might mess up his wrestling. But yeah, it threw Tony off a little bit, and that's where I think, you saw, like, I think it was like a minute into the fight, Tony finally went to the clinch, and then once, he sees his range is so long, it's annoying in the small cage. You feel like there's always a hand in your face. And then you get in the clinch and you're like, wow, this kid can't get off the fence. Like, okay, I'll just hold him here and make him get off. It's like, it's not the most exciting. It's not sexy, but you're winning the position and you're making him work, and you're not really burning a ton of energy. So you think, and I think, it'd be interesting if he came out righty and Tony shot right away, how that would have gone down. But it's, coulda, shoulda, woulda, right?
Yeah, no doubt about it. And, I'm not trying to be Mr. After the Fact or anything like that. I mean, I do kind of remember in round 2 that we got that takedown, but it seemed to me like Neil might have got the points back in the second half of the second round. Do you agree with that at all?
Yeah, it was like I think it was just the optics of the leg kick. Whenever he landed a leg kick, Tony was kind of swinging his leg out, so it looked like it was probably worse than it was. Tony was walking fine after. So there's no damage or anything. I think it was just the, even strikes. And I think if you look at the judging on a whole that night, I think it was like the Giles versus Menafield fight earlier in the night. It was like, I think it was Menafield just kept pushing him against the fence, but wasn't doing anything. And then he lost a fight. So it was almost like, it used to be like, oh, you push a guy against the fence and you win. But now they're trying to discourage that. So it's almost like it's the pendulum swung the other way, and they're almost getting penalized for holding a guy against the fence because they're like, oh, you're stalling, which maybe you are, but you're winning the position. They have to get out. So it's, it was an interesting night because I remember watching that earlier in the night, and I'm like, wow, that guy, he won most of the positions. And I'm obviously going off memory, and I'm watching it while we're in the locker room moving up. But I'm like, okay, like they're kind of like penalized that kid for, stalling a little bit, whereas he was winning the position, but he was kind of holding him, not doing much. It's almost like the judges are like, well, screw you, you're going to stall, we're going to give it to the other guy. And I think, maybe there was a little bit of that in our fight. But yeah, it's tough. Like, we got the takedown. We didn't do much with it, but we were on top of half a minute. We still had like another minute of cage control. He didn't really control us in anything, and then the significant strikes were equal. So it's like, all right, well, the significant strikes are equal. We're controlling the cage. We got more top control and cage control. It's like, I don't know how we lose that round, but it is what it is. It's obviously crying over spilt milk at this point. But
yeah, water under the bridge. So I guess the last thing we'll say about this topic to address my tweet, which basically my tweet was saying, how come Li Jingliang, Tony Martin, and Robbie Lawler tried to offensively grapple versus Neil? Now, you basically explained what happened in the Tony Martin fight. Neil kind of threw us off a little bit, going southpaw, this and that. And I do agree with you 100%. The Tony Martin fight was way closer than the Robbie and the Li Jingliang fight. So there's no disagreement there. I guess the reason I put that tweet out was because despite it being closer, he was still trying to offensively wrestle, which I kind of thought was gassing Tony out. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it did lead to ultimately his demise in the third round. But I think he was leaning on the fact that, all right, I just won the first round. I just pushed him against the cage and he didn't try to get off. And, so he was there for, I think it was total like 2 minutes, 45 seconds of him just being held against the cage. Tony could have been maybe a little busier with, maybe stomping feet and knees and, token strikes. But, yeah, I think it did ultimately lead to him probably gassing out. But I think when you feel like you're winning and you hold someone somewhere in a dominant position and you don't feel like they can really get out, and you don't feel like, you're losing the fight, it's kind of like, all right, we need to win. It's like half your money's on the line, a new contract. Like, there's a lot of pressure that comes with that. And, yeah, I mean, and plus I think the thing that people don't talk about is like when you get in there with someone as long as Neil Magny, especially in the smaller cage, you just feel like it's annoying.
Yeah.
It's hard to really, really prepare for that. But, obviously, Neil's a top 10 guy for a reason. And at the end of the day, like, I just think Tony Martin showed that he's also up there with that caliber of a fighter. He arguably beat Neil Magny, who just dismantled Robbie Lawler. I think he's easily talent-wise, he doesn't have the number next to his name, but talent-wise, he's up there with the top 15 guys, so he can compete. So I just think it's a no-brainer for the UFC to resign him.
Yeah. Now, I know you're not associated with Robbie Lawler, but, going into the fight, I'm thinking to myself, well, Robbie's not going to try to wrestle him. So the fight starts out, he throws a nice punch to the body. I'm thinking, nice, Robbie, and then immediately he shoots. Is it just a case where, like, this dude is, like, almost 6'4", he's got the 80-inch reach? Does it, like, mess with people to where they don't feel as confident in their stand-up ability? That's why they're shooting?
It's tough because if you go and look at some of his losses, like, he gets manhandled, like, easy takedowns, manhandled from, like, you see what RDA did to him, and, some of these other guys,
Larkin?
Yeah, Larkin did more of the elbows and the clinch, right? But I don't know. But I know RDA. Like, RDA took him down fairly easily. It looked like he was a black belt rolling with a white belt in that fight. Obviously, Neil kind of laid an egg, and RDA is a beast. So you look at that, and you're like, all right, an easy path to victory is like this guy doesn't have wrestling. He's just kind of a long-range jiu-jitsu guy, a slip guard, good triangle, stuff like that. So if you can get on top, wear him out a little bit, rest, but I don't know. It's kind of what Johnny Hendricks did,
Yeah.
But yeah, I think once you're in there and, you see that long range and it's super annoying, you're just like, screw this. I'm just going to take him down.
Got you. Yeah. So anyways, about Tony Martin, about them being reluctant to re-sign him. I'm not sure what you can reveal on the situation, but my memory kind of flashes that this is not a new thing. Actually, from what I remember, I heard an interview with Tony Martin before the LaFleur fight, and he said something about how I think Sean might have told him, like, you and LaFleur are the two most boring fighters in the division. I don't know if he was joking or if that really happened, but I seem to kind of remember Tony Martin saying something about that. So that leads me to believe that there's like some kind of history there. Can you tell us a little bit?
No, I just think Tony was, Tony's got a small circle. He's had, he always feels like everybody's out to get him sometimes. Like, if he just assumes the worst sometimes. And I think early in his career, he just felt like maybe Sean didn't like him because he was getting like shorter notice fights. He was having to cut all his weight. And, when you're dieting, you're bitchy. And then you feel, you just keep stacking those chips. And he always just felt like, man, why can't I just get like a full camp? Like, and have time to diet. He felt like he was always crash dieting and stuff like that. And I think a lot of the weight cut stuff led to the perception that maybe Sean doesn't like me. And, but he's really over the last like couple of years, he's really tried to do a lot since he's moved up to 170 to mend that relationship. And he takes ownership of that. I know him and, he's tried to express that to Sean a couple of times. And, I think the relationship is better. It's tough, Tony's, a young kid, chip on his shoulder. He wants to kill the world. And so he's probably said some things in the past that he wishes he could take back, but, he's growing up. He's got a kid now. He's got a daughter, and he's trying to be more mature and be more, respectful of his, his employers and, say the right things. And I think he's shown that maybe he hasn't always said the right things to be a company man, but his actions have always showed it. Like, he's been willing, he's pretty much never said no to a fight. He's flown out of the country to fight the local guys. He's, taking shortest fights with crash dieting when he's at 55. And he wants to be exciting. It's, he's a beast of a grappler. And you see all these fights where he tries to keep it standing because he thinks, well, the UFC will like me more if I get out there and bang, And, you saw he knocked out Ryan LaFleur, and he was doing, good with some other guy. He picked apart Bryce with the leg kicks and
Russian in Russia.
Yeah, he fought a Russian in Russia and, beat the hell out of his leg. And, he probably could have taken down that kid and submitted him, but he's like, that's not what they want. Like, you look at the Johnny Case fight. He took him down with 30 seconds left in the third round, and already had him in a Kimura, probably would have torn his arm off, but the time ran out. He probably could have done that in the first round, but he's like, well, the UFC wants me to, they don't want me to be boring. They want me to be exciting. So I think it's a little bit of like overthinking. Yeah. I think if you just go out there, you could probably do, what he did to Fabricio Camões to a lot of the guys, just take you down and kill you. He's that type of grappler. But I just think, he's done a lot of growing up over the last few years. And I think he knows that, he's probably said some things in the past that he's already apologized for. And, he just wants a clean slate. He wants to show like, yeah, I can compete with these top 15 guys. And I think he's shown that. He's just fallen just a little short each time. Damian Maia's tough guy to be exciting against, and he hung with him. And then, Neil Magny's he's a perennially top 15 guy, and arguably beat him. So I think he's just, he's at a time where he just feels like, all right, I got to do it now. I got to make this next run. And, but obviously he needs the contract to do that. So yeah, it's tough spot to be in.
I hope everything works out in that regard, because, man, he's a very talented guy, so hope the best for him for sure. So, man, we got to talk about your star, Calvin Kattar. So I was telling you off air, man, first time I saw him fight, I mean, that step-through right hand against Andre Fili, I was like, oh, so this guy's a top 5 guy right now. Okay. So what was the first time you saw Calvin Kattar and you were like, oh, okay, he's the real deal?
Well, we always knew it. Like, when he'd fought locally, he was always the top 45er in the Northeast, and I was already coaching Rob Font, and he was now the number 2 45er in the Northeast, and they always wanted those guys to fight. And I met Calvin in 2011 on the set of Here Comes the Boom, and I'd always seen a bunch of his fights anyway. And then when they wanted to put that fight together, I'm like, no, it doesn't make sense. Like, you guys don't need to knock each other out locally. I was like, wait until, go to the UFC. If you ever fight him, it'll be in the UFC. Realistically, you should be training together. And that was when Rob was still at 45. And then Rob went to the UFC, dropped down to 35. And then fast forward a few years, 2016 or 15, Calvin reached out, and he's like, he had a 2.5 year layoff at that point. And, he was healing some injuries, and he was doing some other business stuff. And then he called me. He's like, hey, listen, I want to make another run. Like, I feel like if I don't get to the UFC, I'm going to regret it. And So we put together a plan. I said, all right, come and start training with us. And I started managing him. And then we got him 2 local fights, got him the UFC. And it was funny because when he first got that Andre Philly fight, he hadn't trained for like maybe a month or two. He'd been out in Vegas for Rob's fight, partying. He was in no condition to take a fight. And I remember some people being like, oh, well, hopefully he can just put on a good show and be respectful and then look forward to the next one. And I'm like, bro, like Calvin Kattar on 9 days notice, not having trained for a month, is a competitive fight with Andre Philly. Calvin Kattar in camp will destroy Andre Philly. And that's no shame on Andre Philly. Like Andre Philly is really good, but Calvin's just that much better. Like Calvin's a guy that can win a title. Andre Philly's a guy that, can beat a lot of great guys, but I don't know that he ever wins a title. I think there's just levels to it. And I think, Andre's a beast, but I just know what Calvin's capable of. And that's no shame on Andre. It's me talking about how good Calvin really is. And so we knew that back in 2015 before he went there. And it was just a matter of cleaning up some things. And, I think he had gone on like 8 fights in a row. He hadn't finished anyone. And so once he did his first UFC fight, we were at another gym. And then that's when we all broke off, me, Rob, and Calvin. And we started the cartel. And I brought in some other striking coaches to work with him on his footwork. Because if you look at the Andre Philly fight, he was like landing some really clean shots, but his feet were never underneath them. And so we started working with a different striking coach, Greg Ribello, another heavyweight that I manage. And he's really good. He's worked with a lot of great coaches, and he's got a good coaching style himself. And I just told Greg, I was like, listen, like he's landing clean shots, and then nobody's falling down. Like we got to figure this out. And so Greg just started work with him on like different combinations to bring his feet with him. And then the next fight, so that whole camp we worked with him, and then the next fight was the Shane Burgos fight. And you can even hear Greg call it out. He's like, all right, do it again, but bring your feet with you. And that's when he knocked out Burgos. And so it's just a matter of tweaking some things and, kind of fixing some small holes that he had. Obviously he was already really good, but, we're still trying to make him better.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Calvin's what I like to consider a main event fighter. His style is tailor-made for 5 rounds. So how do you kind of get this quote-unquote slow starts under control?
It's something we've been working on, and even the last fight, the plan was to come out a little harder than we did. And I think if you look back at the Ige fight, the first 90 seconds, I don't think we really threw a punch. And then I think we probably lost the first round. I think if you look at the scorecards, we lost the first round against Jeremy Stevens. So, it's just something that, we're constantly on this like vision quest. We're trying to get better, and we're trying to figure out like, all right, how do we fix this? How do we fix that? I would say we're rowing a boat and there's a bunch of holes in it. We're just trying to plug all the old holes and plug the new ones as they come. And, and at the same time, make bigger oars so we can swim faster. So it's tough, and, you're never going to be perfect, but that's what we're trying to do. And our team motto is to figure out how to learn off your wins. Everybody always says you win or you learn, but it's like, no, you got to win and learn.
Yeah.
And if you just sit, rest on your laurels after a win and think you don't have to change anything, you're wrong. Because you can go back and look at wins and see all the things you did wrong. And I think the Ige fight, Calvin, he ranked himself a B-. He said probably deserved a lower score than that. I don't disagree with him. He's kind of walked through Ige, but it still doesn't mean there's a lot of things that he did wrong and that, we got away with that I think we can fix for the future.
So him giving himself a B-, I'm sure as a coach, that's actually music to your ears, because that means like, hey, I want to get better. I want to improve. If he came out and was like A+, would you have like a different conversation with him?
No, I would just tell him, it would just be like, no, Calvin, like explain it. He's pretty reasonable. So I don't imagine ever having that conversation. He's his toughest critic. So, but yeah, if he came out and thought he was perfect, he's like, no, you're never perfect. There's always things you could do wrong, do better. But, yeah, no, he had the right mindset coming out. It is music to your ears as a coach. When you have the fighter being hard on himself, it means they want to get better, and he's self-driven. And those are the kind of fighters that, it's a dream to work with. I always say like you need 3 things in fighters. You need them to have like the talent, the drive, and then the discipline. And he has all 3. Like I don't have to beg him to show up at the gym. If anything, I'm trying to beg him to slow down because sometimes you can overtrain. But that's a good problem to have. And he's got a good home life. He's super disciplined. He's all in on this. He's not out here trying to work side jobs or anything like that. This is what he does, And then obviously he's got his talent is through the roof, and I feel like we're still just scratching the surface on what he's capable of. So he's yeah, the sky's the limit with him, man. I really truly believe one day that he will have that belt around his waist.
If you had to mention a weakness for Keator, like it's really tough to do, but if you had to mention one, it'd be leg kicks. So is that just simply a case where he kind of sacrifices the leg kicks to get off on that boxing because, traditionally speaking, boxers are kind of heavy on that lead leg?
Yeah, I think you could say that watching the Moicano fight, but then if you really go back and watch his last two fights, he's checked most of the leg kicks. I think Zabit, he checked almost all the kicks against Stevens. I know the announcers are making a big deal of it, but me and his Muay Thai coach were very happy with how he handled the leg kicks. It's like make him miss or make him pay, and he was checking some of those kicks. And then if you look at Calvin's offensive leg kicks, all the focus that we've had on the defense, he's also focused on offense. He's starting to land a lot of leg kicks. I think he was, 8 for 8 on leg kicks against Zabit, and then he landed a couple against Stevens, and then I know he didn't land too many against Ige, but he did land some, and so yeah, it's tough. I think that's one thing you say, slow starter, and he struggled with leg kicks, but I think that's a hole that we've mostly filled. And you look at that last fight, I always say, like, there's three things you can do with leg kicks. You can make them miss, you can make them pay, or you can take them down, right? And Calvin made people miss. He's checked them, made them pay. And then on Ige, you got a nice takedown off a kick. So now if I'm looking at it as a coach and I know that a guy is going to catch a lot of kicks and take you down off it, I'm like, hey, we got to be careful with our kicks, because they might take you down. So I think he did some things in that Ige fight that are going to deter people from throwing as many leg kicks in the future.
That's good. So speaking of the Ige fight, Ige is an interesting cat because, like, he always comes out hard that first round. Now, I need your coach's analysis. Does Ige get a second win in that third round? Because it seems like a lot of these fights, he loses the second round. And I'm not sure if it's him taking the round off, if he's tired from all his activity in the first round. What was your assessment while watching film?
Yeah, no, it seems like he takes his foot off the gas pedal a little bit in the second round. I don't think that's a conscious thing that he does. I don't think he's meaning to do it. He's got a good coach in Eric, and he's from a good gym. I just think I think he kind of just wills his way through the first round, and then the second round, I don't know if it's just bad luck, but it seems like he almost loses a position, then kind of accepts it, and then ends up just kind of losing the round a little bit. And then the third round comes back and like guts out the scrambles. Like if you look at the Bektik fight and the other one, Barbosa fight, he kind of there's a couple scrambles towards the end, and he willed getting on top and squeaked out the third round. So I don't think it's anything that's he's doing wrong. I just think, I don't know. It's very odd because he does kill people in the first round, and then the second round he comes out and loses. Then the third round he comes out all motivated again. So I just think it's been something that's been an anomaly that's happened throughout his career that, because if you look at our fight, it was opposite.
Right.
We won the first round, and then I think some people think he won the second round, and then third round was pretty even, and then fourth and fifth we took over. But that was our plan. We wanted to come out and we wanted to take that first round from him. It's listen, he knows he's a fast starter. It's 5 rounds. Take the first round. He knows he's a little slower in the second. Let's let that weigh on him, and then let him try to beat us in the second round. And then we beat him in the second round, and then okay, crap, I need to win all 3 rounds to win the fight because I don't think there's any way Ige is going to finish us. I just think our skill set with his. Calvin hasn't shown that he's got a weak chin or anything. Knock on wood. So I just think he'd have to steal some rounds to beat us.
So Calvin Kattar versus Max Holloway next. I've seen you lobbying for it.
So we want, man. It's all these other guys. He's the GOAT of the division. He's earned the right to make his calls. But who knows how the other 5 are going to shape out? But a lot of these guys are just lobbying for title fights without actually fighting. So. If he's available, we're available. It makes sense. We're the hottest prospect in the division. We just took out the next hottest prospect, the guy who's on a 6-fight win streak. And, we've shown we're willing to fight backwards and earn a spot, where we got 2 wins this year. We got most wins in the top 10 since 2019. And we have the most knockouts in the division since we entered the UFC. So I think you could argue that we've earned it. And, what we did to Stevens and then, just taking out the hot prospect, 5-round fight showed that we're a headliner. We can fight in those 4th and 5th rounds and do really well. And, there'd be no better honor for us and to test ourselves against, the GOAT of the division. And obviously that's going to fall into his court. If the timing's not right, that's why we're saying, hey, listen, the Ultimate Fighter's coming. We'll go and be a coach on the Ultimate Fighter, and then we can fight you, whenever that's done filming and, airs, and we'll fight you at the end of that. So it'd be good. I think a lot of the fans would jump on that too, because I think Calvin, people are there's a lot of hype behind him, and there's a lot of people thinking oh, maybe he's the guy. And there's no way to better to prove that we're the guy than beat the guy.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, if you look at the rankings, literally that's the only guy ahead of Calvin right now besides the champ that's not booked. So literally it would be a situation where if you had to fight backwards, it would be Josh Emmett. That's the closest guy to your.
He's got an ACL tear, so he's out.
So he's out the picture. So it's really Max Holloway or the champ.
Yeah, and then unless the beat squeaks in and gets that end of October fight against Alex, if Alex wants those pay-per-view money to fight on the Khabib card, then it would leave Yair. But I think we've earned the right to leapfrog Yair. I mean, look what he did to Stevens. He just pulled out against the beat. We've got 2 wins since he last fought. I think we've earned the right to fight Max before he does. I mean, I don't even know why he's ranked above us when he squeaked by Jeremy Stevens. All he did was one body kick and then some ground and pound, and then lost the 3rd round. And then you look what we did to Stevens, and then we went out and beat Ige, and he's just sitting idle. So we have the momentum, not him. I think we should be sitting at 5. We should get to fight Max before he does, and unless he still fights the beat. But either way, I think it makes sense. If you're just looking at it logically on paper, Calvin versus Max is the fight to make.
I mean, when you talk about a fight like Calvin Kattar versus Max Holloway, in normal terms, Holloway is actually usually the taller guy. But this would be the first time in a while where, I mean, he fights someone the same height as him. How do you think that would play into Calvin's hands?
Calvin's got a longer reach. I think Max is only like a 69-inch reach.
Right.
Calvin's, I think, 72. So we get a little bit of a reach advantage. But Max is just so smart, that it's going to be a chess match. I think we have a significant power advantage. I would argue we're the better wrestler. Calvin is a great wrestler. People just don't see it. Jiu-jitsu, who knows, but I don't think that really factors in because I don't think Max will be able to take us down. So Max just extremely smart, comes from a good camp, and he fights very disciplined. When he comes with, this is how I'm going to fight, he sticks to it and doesn't deviate. And he's got really, really good volume. He just has a way of taking rounds with volume, not really hurting you, but then he's got volume. And then, but Calvin's got a significant power advantage. So it's it'd be a good fight, man. It's a clash of styles for sure. You got two really smart fighters. You got the, I think we're even older than Max, but you say the young prospect who's older, but
right.
The new prospect, the new kid on the block, who's got a lot of momentum. And then Max coming off two losses, one being controversial, but before that, a big, bunch of title defenses. And I know he had the Dustin loss, but he's been the king of the division for a long time. And I think there's new blood here, and it's time for him to test himself against it.
I also got to know, how do you think Calvin matches up against the current champ, Alex? Because I don't think I've ever seen Calvin in there with a 5'6" guy. I guess the closest would be maybe Fishgold or Ige. How do you think they match up?
Yeah, I think it's, that guy's obviously a beast. He's a champ for a reason. And I said, Calvin can beat all those guys. There's really not a bad matchup for Calvin in the top 10. It's just a matter of us getting to book the fights. He let one slip away with the beat. But I don't think anybody looks at that fight and thinks oh, Calvin is outclassed. You look at what Zabit's done to everybody else he's fought. He's put him in dominant positions, almost finished the fight, beat him up, frustrated him. There was none of that in our fight. It was just, once again, Calvin started a little bit slow, but then once Calvin started getting going, it was okay, he's putting it to him. So I think, everybody talks about Zabit being the next big thing and this and that. But I think we stole some of that luster that he had. I think people now have more questions than answers about Zabit. I don't think people are looking at him as oh, he's the next guy. I think they're oh, is he the next guy? How would he do in 5 rounds? I think we poked a lot of holes in that theory, and I think now it's still to be tested. So it'll be it'll be interesting to see how he does in a 5-round fight. But I think Calvin matches up against them all good. He goes against Alex. Alex is a shorter guy. You see, we've done really well against short guys. You look what we did to Fish Gold. We look what we did to Ige. Calvin matched up really good against those guys.
So the Jeremy Stevens performance, I don't know why, but initially, like when I watched it live, I thought Calvin got off to a really slow start, watching it live. But when I rewatched it while handicapping the Calvin versus Ige fight, I actually thought Calvin played that first round really smart versus Stevens when I rewatched it. Like I was like really, really impressed on my second glance. What's your opinion, Coach?
Yeah, I mean, it would have been nice if we had a little bit more volume, because then I think we could have stolen around. Because I think we landed the bigger shots. Calvin was downloading a little bit, moving backwards. I think if we would have held our ground a little bit more, I think we could have taken the round. But Calvin's very cerebral. He's looking for openings. He's seeing. He's getting your time. He's getting your range, and then he starts to see tendencies. And that came out in the second round when he saw him reaching, and then he just came in with the elbow.
So a lot of people might not know this, but you actually manage William Knight as well, who, fought on Contender Series twice. And I remember the first time I saw him, on that first Contender Series appearance. We can sit here, we can talk about his power, we can talk about his physique, we can talk about all that stuff. But that's not what stood out to me, Tyson. What stood out to me is this guy's heart, his will to win, his determination. I mean, he's got the resolve of someone that wants to be a champion. So, I mean, what's the ceiling on this kid?
Ceiling's high, man. It's I kind of compare him to like a Derek Lewis, where you see him do some things that are wrong. You're like, why are you doing that? But then he like muscles out of it, gets back up, and knocks you out. The thing people don't even understand is he was like a runner-up wrestler in Connecticut, like a state runner-up, and he's got a good wrestling background, and he's obviously still newish to the sport. He's still learning. He's still cutting his teeth. But you look at a lot of his fights, he's getting in some really bad positions against some really high level guys, and finds a way out and goes. And I think that he's got a really unique background where he got bullied a lot, and he's raised by his grandmother. So he's just got an interesting story that led to all that mental toughness that he has. And there's definitely no quitting him. It's when you're cornering him, it can be frustrating because you're like, no, don't do that, like get up, But yeah, man, you can't teach what he has, which is heart and just the physical attributes that he has. And I know he gets a little bit frustrated when people say that, because he's like, listen, I also work for this. Right. And I'm like, yeah, you're in the gym all day, you're a beast, but I don't think there's any questioning the fact that he's got, really good, he doesn't like when you say I got good genetics. He's like, no, I work for this, but he's obviously he's a specimen, man. He's just, I don't want him to bear hug me. But he's got a really nice kid. It's enjoyable being on fight weeks with him, and yeah, I'm excited to see him. I think he's got that really good fight. Alexa Kamur, I think that's a really good test. 6-0 versus 8-1, and really, it's it'd be interesting to see what Alexa tries to do, because William hasn't really been able to show his stand up, but he's got really good stand up, and obviously got great wrestling, and he's just got power.
Yeah, for those that heard, he's taking on William Knight's taking on Alexa Kamur, who's actually I think Stipe Miocic's like protege or something along those lines, correct?
Yeah, he's one of his training partners. So, but we joke around. It's like, well, last fight we knocked a kid out that was cornered by Anthony Smith. The fight before that, we knocked a kid out that was cornered by King Mo. Right. So it's like, well, maybe Stipe will come with him this time and he get another knockout. So.
That's funny. So another one of your guys, he's actually fighting this weekend, Mike Rodriguez. Slow Mike, they like to call him. So this is an interesting case, and I'm very curious to hear your insight on this. So if I had to create, like, if we have a video game and I had to create a specimen at 205, 6'4", the 80-inch reach. I mean, when you talk about this guy's offensive Muay Thai techniques, the hand fighting, the parrying, his counters, like his Muay Thai is beautiful. The thing I've noticed is, historically speaking, when fights go past the first round, I'm not sure if it kind of falls apart or what the deal is, but I see the talent. I recognize that this guy's got all this potential. What do you think the deal is, Coach, like for him to really put it all together and go out there, maybe win a decision sometime?
Yeah, I think it's just been a kind of a weird thing with all his fights. Like, that Sacramento fight, it was I think that was our second opponent switch. So he took a new opponent like a week out. He's still he just got overwhelmed in that fight. But he said, he's dealing with stuff outside the ring that was just messing him up. And I think he went in there with not so much a clear head. And then, you look at the Busan fight, he just got caught. I mean,
Yeah.
right here, 4 of his teeth were smashed in. They broke his, so there's nothing you can do. When you get caught at 205 or heavyweight, you get caught with a clean punch, it happens. And then, the first fight, I think it was Giles, right? When he fought Giles and he kind of gassed out, at the time, that was like a nightmare matchup for him, like a pressure wrestler. At the time, Mike's wrestling wasn't as good as it was now. I think you look at his last fight, he was really digging underhooks real quick, getting off the fence, wasn't playing that game. And but the hole he had when he fought, Giles in Brooklyn is he had a different strength and conditioning coach, and now he's at skill strength with Mike Perry, and he's filled that hole. Like he's filled out. He's a bigger 205 now. He's actually cutting weight, whereas the John Allen fight and the Busan fight, he wasn't even cutting weight. He was like walking in there on weight. Now he's going into fight week at like 225, and he's an actual, legitimately, correctly sized heavyweight. We put a lot of muscle on him, and he worked really hard with Mike Perry to do that. And he's confident that he can go 3 hard rounds now, whereas before it was like, oh, I hope I don't gas out. You get that big scary monster on your shoulder that you're like worried about. So I think we filled that hole with the cardio questions, and since then it was the John Allen fight. He just got behind early. He doesn't remember a lot of the fight. He kind of got rocked early, and then just kind of going on autopilot. And then the last fight in Busan, he got caught early, and then this fight he caught the other kid early. So I'm excited to see him go 3 hard rounds. I think Ed Herman's the type of guy that he's going to stay there. He's going to be in your face, and he's a tough veteran. And I think this is a good time for a test like this for Mike. So if it does go past the first round, I think you're going to see like a Mike that's still breathing good,
Yeah. I'm really happy to hear that. So I got to know, have you ever bet on your guys? And before you answer this question, I always have to preface this question by saying it's completely legal to bet on your guys. It would only be illegal if you bet against your guys, because then it would be like some fucking like, yo, like what's going on here? Is it a fixed fight? But if you bet on your guys, you're in Vegas, completely 100% legal. So have you ever bet on your guys before?
The only time I've done it is Rob Font's UFC debut when he fought George Roop, and he was a plus 180 underdog. So I think I bet like $300 on him, and I think I won like 540 or something like that. So that was the only time. But I'm not really a gambler. I don't really bet a lot. But there's some times where you're like, all right, we're a big underdog in this fight, and we should be a favorite, so might as well a couple bucks on there. But I generally don't even go to the sports book. But yeah, that was the only time I did, was that first time we were in Mandalay Bay, and I threw down 300 on him, and he won. So that was nice.
So Randy Costa, he's one of your guys too, correct?
No, he's a training partner. So technically he's managed by Joe Lozon, but now he's one of Joe Lozon's students, but he's training at ATT now. Once the pandemic hit, his parents had a house down there, I guess, so he went and hid down in Florida to get away from the germs, I guess. And he's been training down there, and now he fights next weekend. And I think some of the guys from ATT are cornering. I think one of the guys from ATT, and then maybe Joe is still cornering him as well, and I think maybe Gregor Bello too.
Oh, okay. I thought he was one of your guys. Yeah, I saw his debut here in Atlanta. Man, he's an exciting kid. For someone that's had less than 10 pro fights, I'm like, yeah, just give this guy a little seasoning and experience, and he's going to put on a lot of shows for the fans.
Yeah, he's got an exciting style. Like, he's like very unorthodox to the point where I think in that fight, Joe Rogan thought he was injured because he was like kicking weird, but he's just got a very unique style. He'll kick you from anywhere. And he's, the sky's the limit. He's still young, and I'm excited to see how he performs next week after being at ATT for a while.
So a lot of people don't know this. You were actually a pro fighter at one point. You even had a winning record. Was it a natural transition into the management side of things?
Yeah, so my pro record sucked. I think I went like 7-1 amateur and 4-3 pro, but I was working a desk job. Yeah, fighting turds. But I was working a desk job. I was in tech sales. I went to grad school and stuff. So I was like moonlighting as a fighter while I was trying to kick off a tech sales career. And but as I was doing that, I was getting myself my own fights, and then I'd be at practice and I would start coaching the other guys like Rob and grappling and stuff like that, and trying to help them. And the next thing I was cornering those guys, and then they were asking me to get them fights, and that's how it happened. It was never, oh, I'm going to go and be an agent. Like, it was like, no, I just got my friends fights, and then they just kept winning, and it turned into something. And, at the time where it would have made sense to pass them off to a bigger agent, we just had so much trust that we just let's keep this train, keep the train going.
Nice, man. Hey, I really appreciate you taking this kind of time to answer every question I got. Before we get out of here, the fans were very excited that you were coming on Half the Battle, and they got a bunch of questions for you. Down to answer some fan questions?
Sure.
Awesome. So Nick wants to know, other than, the fighters that we've mentioned, who's someone on your roster to watch that people might not know about?
So I got like two young kids. It's like this kid, Mitch Raposo. He's 4-0 at 125. He's actually, if you look at his record, he's 4-0 at 35 and 45, just because we've had some fallouts. And the 25 division was going away, so we were trying to establish him as a 35er. But he was 6-0 amateur with 6 decision wins. He was struggling to finish guys. He was only 18. And then now he's 21 years old. He's 4-0 pro. We were trying to get him on the contender this year, and it's just he beat 4 turds. It's just we've had last-minute fallout, so we've had to take whatever's available. Like even last fight, he fought a guy that was, I think, 1-3, but it was at 145. But it was on 2 days' notice. It was just, all right, let's just get the win. He's a beast, man. He trains out of Regiment Training Center under Brian Raposo and Tommy Teixeira. And the kids, I always say this, he's like the most talented kid coming out of his amateur career, like from a skill set wise, that I've ever seen in New England. The kid's just, the sky's the limit with him. And now we just, working on getting his next fight. Everything's been shut down in New England. So he's one to keep an eye on. And then, Brennan Murat, I always say him, he's 6-1 pro. He almost got on the contender series last summer. He was 5-0, but then he lost on a Friday night, and on Monday we got an offer to be on the contender. And I'm like, oh, he just lost Friday night. And so then since then, he got another win. So he's 6-1. So he just likes to brawl. He's like a Chris Lieben at 145. He just wants to come forward and just smash your face. So he's always exciting. And then I have a young girl, Alexandra Ballou. She's 1-0. She fought for Bellator, but she's not signed with them. She's a 125er, and she's got like the right mindset and the work ethic to like really make it as a female in the sport. And I'm excited to see her. We had a fight booked for her second fight, but then she tore her ACL and she was out for a year. And then we had a fight booked for her, and then the pandemic hit. So it's just been like, but I mean, her attitude over this whole time, over the 1 year, and then since then with the pandemic, she's still in the gym, she's still training, and she's still getting better. So it's, it's encouraging to see her like keeping that same mindset of like, all right, the stream isn't over. Like we're going to keep doing this. So yeah, those are the 3 young people that I have, I have a bunch of prospects, but those are the 3 that kind of stand out as like that, like media would ask me about. Like I have some other guys that are great too, but those are the ones that, the MMA junkies might be like, hey, what's going on with this guy? Like what's next for him? Like I really like him, those are the ones that, they put on the Dana White Contender Series watch list every year and stuff like that. So obviously Alexander needs some more fights, but she'll be one that you'll be hearing about in another year or two.
Nice. So 420 MMA wants to know, on a scale of 1 to 10, how good are your cooking skills?
Dude, I can like cook like a frozen pizza, and I can make like a breakfast sandwich with eggs, but I'm not like I'm not going and making a dinner for my wife. I'm more likely to just go pick it up, get takeout. Not the best cook, probably.
So Quinn wants to know, he says, ask him when Rob Font is getting a fight booked. We need that man back.
Is that Quinn Boyce?
No, it's not.
Yeah, so we just got him cleared by the surgeon the other day. So Rob went into the surgeon's office, then I had a phone call with the surgeon. He's cleared. So we're kind of doing like a pre-camp right now for the next few weeks to get Rob kind of over that hump of, come back from ACL surgery. There's a lot of mental stuff that goes along with that. Just getting him like ready to go. And then the idea would be we get a fight end of November, but in a perfect world, beginning of December, get one fight in before the end of the year and be able to do an actual, little pre-camp right now and then actually do an 8-week camp and then go out to fight week.
Yeah, because I felt like Rob's last 2 fights for Surge and Ricky were like by far the best performances of his career. I feel like he's putting it together to a point.
The kid's a beast. I think he's getting overshadowed right now because Calvin's got all this momentum, but he's the captain of our team. He's the OG, the first one that was in the UFC. He's the one that's setting this standard of how to train for all these younger guys like Calvin and the other guys that we got coming up through. He's the team captain, and I think he walked through Sergio Pettis, who's no joke. I think he gets overshadowed a little bit because of his brother, and but he's obviously he beat Benavidez. He's good. And then Ricky Simone, people could argue that, oh, that's a horrible matchup for Rob. Look at what, Assunção was able to out wrestle him. And then look, he out wrestled Ricky Simone. So, beat him handily with a, torn ACL for 2 rounds. So I'm excited to see him come back and start building momentum. We win this fight. That's 3 in a row. And we're still sitting here at top 10, and we have a lot of good fights there. Maybe, a Assunção rematch, Pedro rematch, the Jimmy Rivera or Cody Stamann fights are out there. And there's a lot of good fights that, I think will be really entertaining to the fans, but it'll help boost Rob's stock and show everybody that, like, okay, like, I know he's had some injuries and healthy scratches. Like, we only fought twice in the last 2 years. I think people start, saying his name again.
Eric also says Rob Font is the most slept on fighter in the UFC. I'm sure you probably agree with that.
Yeah, man. You look at him. I think you could argue if it wasn't for Calvin, people would only be talking about Rob Font's jab. He's just like at this jab clinic that he puts on people, and he's so smooth. And people talk about Calvin's boxing all the time, but I think that overshadows Rob's a little bit. Is Rob's got the cleanest jab that you'll see, and he just keeps adding to his skill set. He's been, since the Assunção fight, he's been wrestling twice a week with the USM, University of Southern Maine coach John Dupree, and now he's a good wrestler. He's legitimately getting in there with wrestlers and being able to handle them and stuff like that. So it's I just think people are sleeping on him just because of the inactivity, which has been out of our control. But I think once he gets back there, that'll be a 3rd win in a row, and then the next, we're booking our fight going for the 4th win. I think people will start talking about it more.
So Goku MMA says, how common is it for coaches and cornermen to motivate their fighter by telling them that they're up 2 rounds when they're clearly down? He also says every commentator has claimed that narrative for corners who do this, but they also counter by saying that they want their coaches to be honest. What's your take?
I think honesty is always the best policy, but I don't think that means you don't go for the finish. I think I said it between the 4th and the 5th round to Calvin against Ige. I was like, listen, we're probably up, 3-1 or whatever. But we need to, we're not trying to get a decision here. We're trying to show the world that we're ready for a title shot, not win a decision. So we go out there, we put a stamp on this and show everybody that we're a contender. I just think you got to be honest. Every fighter is different. Every coach is different. Those relationships are intimate. So it's hard to say, but I think, guys like Rob and Calvin, I think they need to know where they're at. If I tell them I can trust them enough to say, hey, listen, you're up 2-0, but we can't take our foot off the gas, knowing that they won't. Whereas some guys, I think if you tell them, hey, we're up 2-0, they might go into cruise control, and then maybe get finished. So I think there's no need to lie. I think they got to be able to trust you on the next fight, because they're going to go back and watch that, and then they're going to be questioning everything you say.
Right. So
you got to be careful with that. Is the trust between a coach and a fighter, that's not something that happens overnight. It's earned, at every statement you make, every time you say something, that goes into that little database in their brain of, can I trust this guy? And over time, they have to realize that the answer is always yes. And if it's not, then you're not the guy that's going to be able to pull that motivation out them in, a 3rd or a 5th round to go get a win, because they're going to be like, fuck you, you're speaking bullshit, or you didn't tell them the truth. And so I think, in my point of view, honesty is always going to be the best policy.
I was about to say, honesty is the best policy in any walk of life, no matter what it is. So great question. Josh wants to know, ask Tyson who requested the 3-round main event versus Zabit. Was that a Zabit camp or UFC thing? And do you guys as a team regret obliging to those circumstances, considering what went down?
We didn't have a say. It was like, hey, you're the main event now. It's still 3 rounds, no changes. And we went back and we're like, hey, we'll do 5 rounds, And they were like, cool, that's not happening. So I think it was the Beats camp that decided it, and then they just threw it on us, and we went back and we're like, hey, no, we'll do 5. And they were like, no, it's already decided. So we didn't have a say in it at all. We were willing to do 5. It was frustrating, but it is what it is.
So real quick, I just as a coach, so we talked about how Ige, for whatever reason, takes the 2nd round off. Maybe he doesn't even notice that he's doing it. But Zabit's been criticized for his 3rd rounds in fights. Now, let me ask you this. Zabit starts fighting in championship fights or just 5-round main events. Do you think it's a case where he's going to get that 2nd win in the 4th round, come out hard? Or do you actually think that, no, he really is slowing down and he might get finished in the 4th rounds in fights?
I think you're going to see him maybe pace himself a little bit better in the 1st and the 2nd, which will lead to him not being such a front runner. I think he sets a pace to be able to last 15 minutes, and he usually killing guys in the first and second round. You look at a lot of his fights, he takes you down and gets your back. You're treading water and you're drowning. I think if he knows he's in a 5-round fight, he won't carry that same pace. So I think he'll look more human against other guys, because I think up until Calvin fought him, Kyle Bochniak poked some holes in his game a little bit, but up until Calvin fought him, people thought he wasn't human. Like, oh, you can't do anything to him. And then Calvin showed that you can defend his takedowns. You can, push him back on his heels and beat him up a little bit and, get him, it's just we did it too late. But yeah, I think if he's 5 rounds, he's going to have to pace himself a little bit better, which I think means that some of these other guys, like if he fights against a Yair and can't take him down right away, maybe Yair is going to, outvolume him in the first round, and maybe you see Zabit have to fight from behind. It'll be interesting. That's why you do 5 rounds. It'll be interesting to see how he does.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I'm curious myself. So E wants to know how many short notice fights are being offered during the COVID era.
There's a lot going out, but I got one. We have a small roster, so I'm not in the thick of it like some of these other agents that have 150 guys on roster and they're getting calls every day. Like, we keep our circle tight. I think we got like 30 fighters, 8 in the UFC, and then some prospects below that. And I'm not trying to be a puppy mill. I'm trying to really be intimate with all the guys that I have, and I'm learning as I go. But you're starting to see it more. You're starting to see a lot of these every week because of the COVID and because of travel restrictions. You're seeing new guys get called in, so it's definitely creating some opportunities for some of these young prospects.
Nice. So last 2 questions. So Matt says, does Calvin ever plan to move up to 155 in the future?
There's no need right now. I mean, he's open to like if it was like a money fight or anything like that, but that's like stuff you talk about after you get the belt,
Yeah.
Right now, our goal is like straight on the belt. We don't have a hard time making weight. I think he's a bigger 45er, but it's not like we're struggling to make the weight and he's growing out of the weight class. It's, there's no need to think about those things right now. Right now the focus is just taking out the next guy, that Bill Belichick mindset, onto the next one. And then if that one, hopefully it's Max or just the title shot.
Awesome. Well, Tyson, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me right here, right now on Half the Battle. It's been an absolute pleasure. The fans can follow you at Tyson Chartier. Tyson, any message for the fans before we get out of here?
No, man, just this Saturday. When's this going to be posted? Before Saturday?
Yeah, in the morning probably.
Yeah, so watch Mike Rodriguez get in there again, second time in 3 weeks against Ed Herman. I think he's the second fight on the main card. And then next Tuesday night, the New England MMA OG, Dennis Paiva, 32 years old. He's 13-7, finally getting a shot on the Contender Series. He started out his career 3-5, just taking stupid fights. And then he finally, joined a gym, and me and him have been working together. Now we're 10-2.
Nice.
He's one of Calvin and Rob's training partners. He's a beast. Nickname is Sweetbread. So he'll be fighting next Tuesday on the Contender Series. So, really, he's one of those stories that's hard to not cheer for. He's a great kid, super polite, family man. If there's anyone that deserves a shot at getting a contract in the UFC, it's Dennis Paiva. So definitely cheer for him. I think you'll like his story when you hear it on the broadcast. And yeah, man, just thank you for having me on.
Oh, man, it's my pleasure. Thank you again for being so gracious with your time. For the fans, make sure you follow me at Best Fight Picks. Go to bestfightpicks.com. Subscribe to Half the Battle on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, Stitcher, Spotify, all the places where we are available. We will be back to break down the fights tomorrow. And until the next time, let's cash these bets.